Hello everyone, happy Monday. So, we're going to actually discuss some of the things coming out of the Labour conference before I actually go to Liverpool. Not for very long, just going for this thing with Graham's this evening. But yeah, I've got to dash straight off after this. So, I thought we could start off, let me put it up here, with, because there's a few little things coming out. Steve Reid has talked about Labour are going to, we knew that they were going to be building some new towns. Apparently 3 of them are going to begin before the election. So that'll be an ongoing thing. That'll be, I suppose, what you do in terms of election strategy. So come the next election, Labour need to be able to say, look, we've done this, 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 this and this, right? And you can all see it and this is grand. And then obviously they need to talk about what they're continuing to do. So it obviously adds more credibility if there are things clearly underway. And obviously you can't build a town in a few years anyway, but you can certainly get started on it. So 3 of the towns are going to be started this Parliament, according to Steve Reid, who was sporting a mock MAGA hat, but with Build Baby Build on it, if you notice. Well, it was a red baseball cap type hat. But some of the more interesting stuff so far is coming from Rachel Reeves, even though she hasn't actually done her speech yet. But she's been doing the interview round. So there was the first one on youth unemployment, which I have questions about, but that's maybe interesting. But I want to see the detail. But let's start off with this. I will just go through as the Guardian been reporting it because of tax rises. So we obviously know that the cost of borrowing has increased. The cost of borrowing increasing has, of course, meant that Rachel Reeves's budget yet again is out of kilter. So yet again, only 3 ways to close. Well, there's 4 things she could do. There are actually 4 things she could do. One of them is she could change the fiscal rules. Now, she did change fiscal rules last year, but specifically, and she's not going to, by the way, so that's why I say there's 3 realistic, but a 4th one technically. She could say that, do you know what? We don't need to reduce debt as a share of GDP over the next 5 years because, like Keynesian economics would say, this is not a sensible thing to do. I was going to say a mad thing to do. It's not quite that, but it's not a sensible thing to do. However, Labour believe, and they may be right, by the way, I'm not saying they're wrong on this, but Labour believe that particular fiscal rule is essential for the confidence of the public. So, or maybe the confidence of the markets. Maybe the confidence of the markets as well. But it's needed for confidence. So that one is not going to happen. She's not going to change that fiscal rule. So your second option is you could raise borrowing. She probably can't. She actually raised borrowing quite a bit last year, and that caused a little bit of a wobble, but then the markets decided they were sort of okay with it. She hasn't really got scope for more borrowing. Your third option is you cut spending. Well, we don't really want that. In all honesty, it's not like the Tories were lavish with their public spending. So then your final option is tax rises. So Rachel Reeves, despite the fact last year was saying no more major tax, she didn't sort of say no more tax rises as such, but the implication was there would be no more significant tax rises, none worth reporting on. That is no longer going to be the case. She's been laying the groundwork for that. Let's have a look. So let's just see what they're saying. Now, there's a couple of comments there. I'll come back to those in one moment. But let's just see what they're saying. Because I think the key line here is, so in an interview, Rachel Reeves said, well, look, I think everyone can see in the last year that the world has changed and we're not immune to that change. So she's basically saying, look, there are things that have happened in the last year since I did the last budget that have materially changed. I've got to adapt to that change. That's fine with a caveat. But then she said, whether it is wars in Europe and the Middle East, whether it is increased barriers to trade because of tariffs coming from the United States, whether it is the global cost of borrowing, we're not immune to any of those things. Now, here's where, if I wanted to be critical of this, I might pick a few holes, because you'd instantly say to yourself, okay, so Rachel, what has changed in the last year? You gave your budget on October 31st, 2024. What has changed since? So let's go down the list of things she says. Wars in Europe. Well, a war in Europe, that's been in place since 2022. She cannot say that that's materially different unless she's going to try and suggest that she believed Trump when he said he was going to bring peace to Ukraine in 24 hours, right? Which I don't think she's going to claim. So she can't really claim that she didn't know about that last autumn. Then you've got in the Middle East. Again, that's since 2023, right? And again, there was no... She couldn't really claim that she thought that peace would come quickly in 2025, right? So I'm not sure she can claim that one either. That was known about at the time. So what's the next one? Increased barriers to trade because of tariffs coming from the United States. Now, that's more plausible. She could, for some people, claim that one because that is new. That is new since she gave her budget last year. And technically, that was before Trump won the election. So it was, yes, it was a realistic, there was a realistic prospect of Trump winning the election. And he had said he was going to go mad on Trump. In fact, you know what? His tariffs aren't actually as severe as he promised. But she could claim that. She could say, well, we didn't know about that. And she can't set a budget for possible tariffs as a result of a possible US election, right? So she might claim that one. Then she says global cost of borrowing. Yeah, that's up. But again, is that unpredictable? Not really. So really, she can only really blame the tariffs. But interesting that she is blaming the tariffs. Goose there saying, I think Reeves is prepping to raise VAT because they refuse to explicitly say they will not when challenged. Just the manifesto stands not no. So, well, this is interesting. Yeah, so there is a lot of talk about VAT. Here's the thing, though. She has explicitly said, just as Starmer says, that they're not going to breach the manifesto promise on VAT. So what did the manifesto say on VAT? That they wouldn't raise the rate of VAT. So what that says is they're not going to raise VAT above 20%, at which point they're not raising the rate of VAT. There's no... Now, what The Guardian says, they say somewhere, hold on, where was it now? But they said somewhere, I'm probably not going to be able to find it now, I was reading it earlier, where they were saying... So, first of all, they do make mention of the fact that the income tax freeze is probably going to extend beyond 2027. I think that's now... She did make a big song and dance about the fact that she would not be extending it beyond 2027 last year. That's clearly gone now. It's they're staying in place. If we're honest, they're staying in place. And that technically, you can categorise that as an increase on tax on working people, because that means at the lower end as well. It's not like they're freezing the upper bands. If they were freezing just the upper bands, they'd get away with it. But that means they're also freezing the personal allowance as well. That's what that would imply, which that is going to increase the tax on working people. Admittedly, your wages have to go up into it to affect it, but you know, that is effectively an increased tax. She's talked about wanting the OBR to only produce one economic forecast a year. Good, because utterly ridiculous to have them multiple times a year. I can't find the statement, but the implication is, I don't know what. So it's like, how can you raise VAT, right? So you could raise the rate. Then it doesn't sound like they're going to do that because that would be a breach of the manifesto promise. So what else can you do? Well, you could apply VAT to some things that don't have VAT on them. And I think there was a suggestion here, and I can't now find it, now that I'm trying to look for it again, trying to suggest that itself would be debatable as to whether it's a breach of manifesto. No, it wouldn't be debatable at all. It wouldn't be. And the reason we can say categorically that applying VAT to something where it is not an increase in VAT is because the Labour manifesto specifically, explicitly said they were going to apply VAT to something where VAT did not previously exist. Private school fees, right? So that was in their manifesto. So anyone trying to claim that... So let's say, for example, I suspect they won't do it on this, but this is one I would want to know about. So if you hire a solicitor, right, and they bill you, there's a price, and then there's VAT on top of it. So you pay VAT on legal services. But if you get financial advice of the sort, you know, that you need to get every now and then, like mortgages or whatever it happens to be, investments, you don't pay VAT on that. Now, I don't know why that is. I don't know why it should be we don't pay VAT on financial services. So let's say they decided they were going to put VAT on financial services or something, or cake. I've said that before. I don't, you know, not having VAT on like fresh food, like, you know, normal food staples, that's good, grand. But cake, we don't need cake. We don't need cake. So like we have VAT on biscuits and not cake. And that has caused problems in the past in terms of what's a biscuit and what's a cake. But just put it on cake. And financial services. So if they did that, would that be a breach of the manifesto? No. How would it be a breach of the manifesto? Oh, they said they wouldn't increase the rate of VAT. That's not increasing the rate. The rate would be the same. It would just be applying to a product where it had previously not applied. You know, you'd say, oh, but it's gone from 0 to 20%. Yeah, but VAT hasn't. That's just been applied to a different thing. And because in their manifesto they promised to apply VAT to at least one thing where it hadn't previously applied, clearly not. So that would be just making a fuss. But I will be interested in that. But what Reeves has definitely been setting the scene for is there are going to be significant tax increases. Not necessarily on you or I, but there are going to be. Now, if you think about it then becomes interesting as to where those tax rises go, because they really have to at least be able to say they're not increasing tax on working people. Yes, we know that if they keep the income tax bands frozen, that you're going to say that is, but they will just argue the toss on that because they'll talk about rates rather than amount of tax. Apart from anything else, to pay that higher rate, you would then need to, by definition, be earning more anyway, they'll say. But they can't increase a tax that really makes it look like it's hitting working people. They really don't want to hit businesses because they've, you know, they paid for the employer's national insurance hike. So where do you go? Where do you go? It'll be things like, basically what you need is taxes on passive income, really. You need, you know, increase capital gains again, like increase it in line with income tax, why not? Put VAT on things where VAT doesn't currently exist. I mean, that might still be a tax on working people, but if it was, you know, again, no one's going to say they need cake to be cheaper. Urban Legend says explicitly no to VAT today. So she said no in terms of increasing the rate, but that doesn't mean to say there won't be a change in VAT. So they won't raise the rate above 20%. That would be mad. That would be a clear breach of the manifesto. But they could, as I say, they can apply VAT where it hasn't previously existed. But let's go through a couple others as well. Goose there saying, Phil, have you seen that Liz Kendall is going to own the digital ID system rather than the Home Office? Seems like the Home Office should own it. Well, I don't know. I mean, because you're thinking in terms of, I don't, where's Liz Kendall come into it? I can't even remember which department she's in charge of now. I've actually forgotten where she's moved to. Got to look it up now. This bloody reshuffle. So, because I haven't seen this. I haven't seen which department. Secretary, she hasn't got a department. Well, she has. Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. That's fine. Do you know what? You could put it in any number of ones. Let's get rid of this now. You could put it in any number of ones, in all honesty. You might be thinking Home Office because of the immigration angle, but it's not really that. That's just one of the things, one of the selling points. It's not about immigration. It's actually about work. You could have argued the Department for Work and Pensions should do it, but arguably they've got enough on their plate. So maybe if it's gone to the Department for Technology, Liz Kendall, maybe that's just because they haven't got that much on. It's not a huge department. They've not got that much on. Maybe they've got the bandwidth to deal with it in a way. But I actually wouldn't have thought the Home Office. I mean, yeah, anything to do with home affairs technically could be the Home Office, right? And national ID. Yeah, you could make a case for the Home Office dealing with it, but it's not essential. It's not. You know, I think there's several departments you could say can take ownership of it. You could say the Home Office because it's a home affairs issue. You could say the Department for Work and Pensions because it's a work issue. It's how you're going to prove that you're eligible to work. You can say a science, innovation and technology issue because it's a technology solution. I would just say you would give it to whichever department has got the room to do it, has got the bandwidth to do it. The Home Office has got a shitload on its plate. The Department for Work and Pensions has got a shitload on its plate. The Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, not so much, I guess. Could the US government shut down the potential for its first economic damage, shake up the IMF and World Bank to lessen fiscal rules? I mean, I don't know, because I'm not that much of an expert on these things. But all I would say is these things happen a lot, don't they? Government shutdowns happen in the United States all the time. They have a mad system. There are some things they have in America which are quite good, and I sort of think, we could learn from them a bit, although it's very difficult to say anything confidently these days. But this thing, and they have, it's very common. It's very common. This idea that as soon as whenever you have a new president, it's like you almost always very quickly have this shutdown because it's like wrangling. It's like political positioning and wrangling. In this case, I am definitely on the side of the Democrats because they're saying and I don't know why they can't get this message out. All they're trying to say is we're trying to protect healthcare here. So they're not actually just trying to block the finance bill as such. They're just saying we want to preserve healthcare for vulnerable people, which should be a really powerful message. I don't know why they're not making more of it. But they happen all the time. And they usually happen, although it's not the case now, they usually happen when Congress is controlled by a different party than the White House. And it's quite common to happen fairly soon after an election because it's like they're just testing their elbows out. They're just like getting used to the new situation. What sort of speech do you want to see from Starmer tomorrow? Combative, conciliatory, urban legend, resignation? No, not resignation. Don't be silly. Combative. In your face. I want in your face. At the end of the day, it's a Labour Party conference. He's not there speaking as Prime Minister. He's speaking as Labour leader, right? He is the Prime Minister, but he's speaking as Labour leader. And what he says will be reported more widely, so you've got to be a bit careful. But at the end of the day, it's a party political speech. It's a tribal speech. I want him to be more combative as Prime Minister, quite frankly. I've said so. But as party leader, you all the time, never mind the political situation, you should all the time be combative, in your face. That's the time to lean into tribal politics because it's a tribal political affair. He needs to be really in your face about what Labour have done. They've talked about the fact that the public aren't happy with the slow rate of progress, but the progress hasn't been slow. I get how people think it because they somehow think a government can change things overnight. A government can make something much worse overnight because you can cancel stuff. You can do what Trump's done. You can impose tariffs. You can wreck things. You can impose tariffs quite quickly, even though that seems to be illegal. You can withdraw funding from things. You can do that in the drop of a hat. You can kill funding. So you can destroy public services overnight, but you can't build them up overnight. Because even if you allocate the funding, then you've got to then spend that funding. That means hiring people, building things. All of these things take a long time. So their progress hasn't actually been slow. They've actually been doing a lot. Parliament has been very busy. But people nonetheless feel that it's been slow. But this is where he needs to fight back and say, well, we've been doing this, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this. Constant. Do you remember the Gordon Brown? And I know he lost the next election, right? But that doesn't matter. The Gordon Brown thing, when he was Prime Minister, when he became Prime Minister, his conference speech, massive long list of things they'd done. Admittedly, they'd been in power for a lot longer. But Starmer could come out with a massive long list as well. It's just they're not as evident to the public, but they're still in progress. It'll still be done. And then he needs to do two things. He needs like that sort of rally around the flag thing because we're actually doing good shit here and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And he needs also to draw attention, because the best way to get people to rally around the flag is actually that external threat. And that's what he needs to do. So he needs to lean into that external threat and give people the confidence he's going to fight it, which they've started to do. Literally, they've clearly changed their mind on something in the last couple of weeks. But that's the sort of speech. I mean, I'm not going to listen to it. I don't listen to political speech. I read transcripts. I'll read the transcript later because I can read it quicker than they can say it. And it's not like Starmer's. Even politicians who are good at speeches, I tend not to listen to them. I'll read the transcript later, or I might watch a few clips, but I'm not going to sit there and I'm certainly not going to listen to someone who's not good at speeches. Lahai says, liking the stance against reform, contrary to what journos say, you can vote for racist policy and not be racist. Well, Rachel, I think, was it Rachel Reeves making that point? She's made that point today on the basis you don't vote for a party on a single policy and out of discontent, or you can just be conned. Because that's what they're trying to say. Like the Daily Express today is trying to say, oh, Starmer's saying if you've got any concerns about immigration, you're racist. No, he's not. That's a lie. That's not even spinning things. That is a downright lie. Because Labour have talked about concerns about immigration. They're still doing it. They haven't changed the tune on that. All Starmer has said is that a policy of people who are settled in the UK, they're living here, they're all documented, they're all fine, they're working, doing the thing. Removing them from the country is racist. That's what he said, and that is true. That is racist. Really that simple. Because by what basis is it not racist? Put VAT on newspapers. Are there not VAT on newspapers? Are there? I don't actually know that. Is that in this case? Yeah, definitely do that. Although you won't raise much from it because not many people buy newspapers these days. They're mostly online. They're doing their business online now. It will be attacked as a blow against free speech, of course. A bit like Darren Grimes when he can't be monetised on Facebook. Oh, that's 0 rated for VAT purposes. Oh, yeah, whack VAT on that. Why not? Why not? They probably won't, but why not? Stance against reform seems to be okay now, as that's how many in the public see themselves voting out of frustration. Decent step. Happy with the work with Albanese too. So the message is getting better. It's obviously work in progress because they've clearly, this is not something they've planned for a while. This is a knee-jerk reaction, right? But okay, at least it's a knee-jerk in the right direction. But my issue, and I'm going to talk about this in my second video today. My issue is, even if you can improve the messaging, let's say the messaging is absolutely fine. Let's say in a couple of months' time, we've seen it all now, and it's like, yeah, this is what they should have been saying earlier on, but this is fine now, we're okay with this. Let us just say, for the sake of argument, you still need to deliver that message to people. It's one thing to say it in an interview or in Parliament. Again, how do they know the public? They need to know that the public are getting that message. You know, again, I despaired when Starmer very recently kicked back accusations that he's not loudly talking about all Labour's achievements. Says, yes, we are. No, you're not, because people aren't hearing it. And like I keep saying, I'm gonna have to keep increasingly use this phrase. I haven't used this phrase for years, but it's a phrase in teaching that we have, which is just because you taught it doesn't mean people learned it. The same applies in politics. The same applies in any form of communication. Just because you think you said a thing doesn't mean people got the message. You need to check people got the message. And if they didn't get the message, you need to do better. You need to try harder. You need to keep doing it, right? That's what they need to do. There's no point in saying a thing in an interview somewhere and then go, well, we said it months ago, this thing. Like, if people don't, they're not going to hear it. You say it once, you have to say it lots and lots of times and very loudly. So it's not just a case of getting the messaging right. They have to get the delivery of the messaging right. Fazila, think we're mad too. Pod Save America covered the reshuffle, did they? Thought it was nuts moving people around after. Yeah, it is, absolutely. I mean, the odd one strategically I can get. Obviously, they had to have a bit of a reshuffle when Rayner resigned, but they were planning on one anyway. We knew before the summer they were planning on one. And literally moving all, like the majority move. Let me just go down this list. Let me look. So go down the list. So Starmer didn't move. Lammy moved. Reid moved. Reeves didn't. Darren Jones moved, although he's not a Secretary of State, but he still moved. Now, don't get me wrong, I approve of some of these moves, but, you know, just the sheer number of them. Yvette Cooper moved, Shabana Mahmood moved, John Healey didn't, Wes Streeting didn't, Bridget Phillipson didn't, Ed Miliband didn't, Pat McFadden moved, Peter Kyle moved, Liz Kendall moved, Lisa Nandy didn't, Emma Reynolds moved, Heidi Alexander didn't, Hilary Benn didn't, Douglas Alexander moved, Joe Stevens, no, I think she's staying in place. Sir Alan Campbell's moved, although it's just Leader of the Commons. That's not a big deal. You know, Jonathan Reynolds moved. James Murray moved. And some of these needed to move, but just the sheer number of them, there was no need for it. There were a couple that I will say at the time I thought, like, moving Lammy and Cooper, I thought were bad ideas. But I have since... There may be strategy in that because if Labour really want to go ahead, well, I don't know, is there and isn't there? Because what happened, so the digital ID thing, right? So Starmer really wants to go ahead with it, he's announced it, they're going to go ahead with it, okay? I think it's politically tricky. I think it's politically inadvisable at this time. I'm a supporter of the policy, but I just think it's politically inadvisable right now. But anyway, they're doing it. And then I gathered that Yvette Cooper was opposed to the scheme. So then I thought, well, it makes sense to move her out the Home Office because you want a minister who believes in the scheme to take over it. But if it's going to Liz Kendall in the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, then Yvette Cooper's opposition would have had... I mean, the Home Office is going to have some... So maybe still, because they're still going to have some involvement, even if they're not delivering it. But so maybe that was some strategy there. Obviously, Rayner had to be replaced. He's been replaced with Steve Reid. Good. I like Steve Reid. Then that meant you needed someone at DEFRA. So there was, you know, and the fact that Darren Jones was going to be moved to number 10, which is again is a move I support, meant that you needed a new Chief Secretary of the Treasury. So all of these, you know, some of the moves made sense, but some of them didn't. Some of them really didn't. But anyway, there it is. Thing is, it's not the reason why public hates Labour. Most of it can be owed to the winter fuel allowance benefit cuts. They need to get this employment rights bill out quick and hammer reform to get back. That yes and no, I would say to that. So I would say a lot of dissatisfaction with Labour is because of the fact that they're failing to get the messaging out, because a lot of people are looking at it and thinking, well, you're not doing anything. Well, you're not doing anything. So I actually say, no, messaging is a huge part of that. That being said, yes, the winter fuel allowance and the disability cuts, particularly the winter fuel allowance, was a bad misstep amongst key voters. A really bad misstep. So that was a case of not Labour looking like they're not doing anything, but actually doing bad things. So yes, those were, and there's no downplaying how serious those were. If they put it this way, am I going to say, would Labour be in a better position polling wise if they hadn't gone ahead with the winter fuel or disability cuts policies? Yes, I think polling wise they would be in a better place. But I think the biggest factor is still the communication, because even with those things, if they'd have made those cock-ups, but they were much better at getting their messages out about all the other stuff they're doing, I don't think they'd be behind Reform UK. They may be close. It might be a bit too close for comfort still, but I don't think they'd be behind. I think the messaging is the key thing. Starmer advisor reshuffle would have been a better choice. Well, they've done that as well. There's been actually quite a lot of changes. I mean, there's been a few resignations, a couple of them, well, at least one due to scandal, but there's been a couple of resignations. But there has been a reshuffle of advisors, in all honesty. So actually some of the key, and I mean the top, because obviously there's loads of advisors. I'm not talking about junior ones. I mean, at the top, there has been a reshuffle of advisors effectively. We will see how well it works out. I mean, you might, for example, take note of the fact that Starmer's position now on Reform UK and, particularly anti-immigration rhetoric has changed. Has that changed because the advisors have gone, actually, no, we need to now adapt? Or is it because of new advisors coming in and going, this is batshit, let's change it? I don't know. But there has actually been a change to advisors. Not at the very top, of course. But very senior. There are some very senior, as in advisors who've got direct contact with Keir Starmer, who have his ear. Some of them have changed. So some of the advisors literally in Keir Starmer's ear have actually changed. We'll need to see. He needs to sack McSweeney. He needs to move McSweeney. Last one on here. Get Burnham to be head of comms. His view on the bond market has clearly inspired his peers. Oh, do you know what? I mean, I've seen even Scottish Labour today are telling him to, will you STFU? Will you just shut up? He is. Andy the Adder Burnham, isn't he? He's a total snake. But it is what it is. Hopefully the rest of them just realise this and tell him, look, you're doing all right in Manchester, lad. You carry on doing that. And then what is he doing in Manchester? He talks about you need a leader that's not London-centric. And yet what's he doing in Manchester? Copying London. What is his great achievement in Manchester? Changing public transport to modelling it on the London system, which is a good thing because it's a good system. But his great achievement in politics is literally copying London. And he's saying we need a leader who's not London-centric. Well, what are you, mate? What are you? Anyway, we'll leave it there because I've got to dash off to Liverpool now. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of day. And until next time, I'll see you later.